The penthouse of Giovanni Calabrese rises 43 stories above Los Angeles, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the sprawl of the city like a kingdom laid at his feet. At 2:47 in the morning, a single man stands motionless in the darkness, the glow from his tablet illuminating a face carved from stone, sharp cheekbones, a scar running from his left eye to his jawline like a blade mark, dark hair silvered at the temples though he is only 38 years old. This is Giovanni Calabrese. In his world, loyalty is currency and betrayal is a death sentence. The tablet trembles slightly in his grip. For 14 nights, he has watched the woman he saved slip out of his protected safe house through the service entrance. Aria Morgan. 27 years old but looking decades older, with calloused hands and eyes that have forgotten how to close completely even when she sleeps. She moves like a ghost, quiet, careful, always looking over her shoulder, always carrying that dark duffel bag she never brings back. The security footage shows her again tonight at 2:31 a.m. She wears the same borrowed clothes, grey hoodie, black jeans, and her dark hair is pulled back so tightly it seems to hurt. She glances toward the camera she does not know exists, and in that split second, Giovanni sees something that makes his jaw clench so hard his teeth ache. Fear. But not the fear of being caught by him. The fear of someone else. Behind him, Lieutenant Tony Rossi shifts his weight. Tony is a man built like a wall, all broad shoulders and thick neck, wearing an Armani suit that costs more than most people's cars. He has worked for Giovanni for 12 years and in that time has learned to read silence the way a sailor reads the ocean. Boss. His voice is careful, calibrated. She made contact again tonight near the harbor. Same car as before. Same driver. You want me to handle it? Giovanni does not look away from the tablet. The video plays again, Aria stepping into a dark sedan with tinted windows. The door closing. The car disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness. In his mind, Giovanni is already constructing the architecture of her betrayal. The phone calls. The late-night meetings. The way her hands shake when she comes back, as if she has been running. The way she looks at him now with something that might be guilt. How many times? Giovanni's voice comes out low, measured, like venom poured slowly into water. 14 nights, boss. Always between 2 and 3 in the morning. Always the same location. Always returns within 2 hours. 2 hours. What could be done in 2 hours? Information could be shared. Documents could be photographed. Locations could be revealed. In 14 nights, she could have given them everything. The safe houses. The names of his men. The routes, the suppliers, the judges in his pocket. Everything. And her daughter? Giovanni asks. Still sleeping in the East Wing with the nanny you provided. Doesn't know her mother leaves. The word mother hangs in the air like a curse. Emma. That is the child's name. 5 years old, golden curled, with a gap between her 2 front teeth and a laugh that sounds like bells. She has been in Giovanni's penthouse for 3 weeks, and in those 3 weeks, his men have learned to leave toys on the marble floors, to soften their voices when she is near, to let a 5-year-old girl practice painting their fingernails with colors that should never be painted on a man's hands. Giovanni had told himself it did not matter to him. The child was nothing. A consequence of the mother's desperation. But that was a lie he told himself in the daylight. Tony is waiting for orders. This is how it works in Giovanni's world. A man suspects betrayal. The man makes a phone call. The person who betrayed him disappears into the city's darkness and is never heard from again. Clean. Final. Just. Leave her, Giovanni says quietly. So. Leave her. For now. He sets the tablet down on the glass desk, and his reflection stares back at him from the polished surface, a man who looks exactly like what he is. A man who commands life and death with a single word. A man who has broken bones and buried secrets and told himself 1,000 times that he has no capacity for mercy. Watch her more closely. Every movement. Every call. Every person she meets. I want to know why. Tony nods slowly, but confusion flickers across his features. In 12 years, he has never heard Giovanni Calabrese ask why. Somewhere across Los Angeles, in a neighborhood where the streetlights are broken and the buildings lean like tired old men, Aria Morgan sits in the front seat of a stranger's car with her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she thinks it might break through her skin. The woman driving is named Sophia. She is 42 years old and has been missing her right eye for 6 months. The empty socket is covered with a patch, but that is not the cruelty that marked her. It is what she does say, in a voice hoarse from screaming. There are 5 of them still in his operation. 5 women who have not yet escaped. I have their locations. She pulls a worn photograph from her jacket and places it in Aria's lap. 5 faces. 5 women with eyes that have learned not to hope. Why are you doing this? Aria whispers, though she already knows the answer. Because the alternative is to stay silent. Because silence is the same as complicity. Because sometimes the only way to survive is to save someone else first. Because no one saved me when I was still breakable, Sophia says. The silence that follows is not peaceful. It is the silence before thunder. It is the silence of a woman with one eye and a courage that has nowhere to hide. Aria takes the photograph. Takes the address written in careful letters on the back. Takes the burden of knowing that somewhere in Los Angeles, 5 women are being held in a warehouse that smells of sweat and fear and the particular brand of hopelessness that comes when you realize the world does not care if you disappear. If he finds out. He will not, Sophia says, but her hand trembles on the steering wheel. Not if you are careful. Not if you are smart. But what she does not say is this: in Giovanni Calabrese's world, careful and smart are not enough. Careful and smart are just slower ways to die. The drive back to the penthouse takes 30 minutes. Aria sits in the back seat of a car that costs less than the champagne Giovanni Calabrese drinks at breakfast, watching the city pass like a film she has already seen. Homeless men sleep in doorways. Teenagers sell things on street corners. A woman in a red coat walks alone and Aria thinks about how invisible they all are, how easy it would be to disappear, how easy it is being a nobody that no one looks for. She thinks about Emma sleeping in a room with white walls and a ceiling that glows with painted stars. She thinks about Emma's small hand holding hers this morning before the nanny came to take her away. She thinks about the choice that has no good answer, only a choice between different kinds of destruction. The car stops at the service entrance. The guard, a man whose name Aria does not know, nods her through without speaking. He has been instructed not to see her, not to question, not to tell. This is his job. The hallways of the penthouse are empty at this hour. The air conditioning hums like a mechanical creature breathing in the darkness. Her shoes make no sound on the marble. She has learned to move through this space like she is not here, like she is a ghost haunting a very expensive building, like she is a woman made of nothing but secrets and guilt. She passes the room where Emma sleeps. She can see the small lump of her daughter beneath the white duvet. She can see the corner of a stuffed rabbit. She can hear nothing because the door is soundproofed, and this is a mercy and a cruelty all at once. She can be this close to her child and still be completely alone. In the master suite, Aria removes the borrowed clothes and showers in a bathroom larger than the apartment she used to share with her mother. The water is hot enough to turn her skin red. She thinks about the 5 women in the photograph. She thinks about Sophia with her one eye and her unbreakable spine. She thinks about what happens to people who betray Giovanni Calabrese, and she thinks about what happens to women who do nothing. When she returns to the guest room that has become her prison of safety, she finds an envelope on the pillow. Inside is a check for $5,000. Inside is a note in handwriting she recognizes as Giovanni's, for Emma. For her future. Whatever yours turns out to be. And inside is a key she has never seen before. Aria sits on the edge of the bed with the check trembling in her hands and understands, in that moment, that she is no longer invisible. She has been seen. She is simply waiting to find out what Giovanni Calabrese does when he sees the truth. The storm will pass and you are far stronger than you think. But first, you must survive the night. 3 weeks before the black SUVs arrived on the Pacific Coast Highway, Aria Morgan stood alone in the Sunset Boulevard diner at 2:18 in the morning, her fingers moving across the checkered floor tiles in mechanical circles, pushing a mop that had seen better years. The neon sign outside buzzed and flickered, open 24 hours, casting a sickly green glow across empty red vinyl booths that reflected the fluorescent lights like mirrors of her own exhaustion. The smell of stale coffee and grease hung in the air, thick enough to taste, a smell that had soaked into her uniform so deeply she would carry it home in her hair and her skin. She had worked the 9 to 6 shift. Then the midnight to 3 shift. $70 in tips across 18 hours, which meant she had earned $3.88 per hour, which meant she had failed again. At 3 a.m., Aria counted her money in the employee break room. $17.40 lay in a small pile on the laminate table next to her apron. The envelope was still in her pocket. The final notice letter. Stamped in red. $22,000. 7 days remaining. She pulled out the other piece of paper. Emma's school supply list. Pink construction paper glued to white cardstock in her 5-year-old daughter's careful printing, pencils, crayons, glue stick, safety scissors. She had circled the word scissors 3 times. Aria had bought nothing yet. She had $5 left. One crumpled bill folded in her apron pocket like a prayer that had already been refused by God. At 3:15, she locked the back door and walked through the parking lot. Summer in Los Angeles does not mean cool nights. It means humidity thick as breath, the sky pressing down like a hand against her chest, clouds gathering on the horizon in shapes that looked like violence waiting to happen. Her 1998 Honda sat in the corner where it always Saturday. Rust blooming along the bottom panels. A crack in the windshield spreading like a spiderweb. She turned the key. Nothing. She turned it again. The dashboard remained dark. The engine was silent, the way only a dead thing can be silent. 3 more times she tried. Her hands gripped the steering wheel. Her breath came faster. This was not a moment for panic. Panic was a luxury item. Panic was for people who had other options. She gathered her things and started walking. The Pacific Coast Highway stretched dark and mostly empty at 3:20 in the morning. Occasional cars passed. None of them stopped. A woman alone at night was a thing to avoid. A woman alone and soaking wet became a thing to fear. The first drops fell at 3:28. Within 2 minutes, the summer storm unleashed its full violence. Lightning split the sky with such intensity that the world turned white. Thunder cracked directly overhead. Then the rain came in sheets, the kind of rain that seemed personal, aimed specifically at her, each drop like a small fist hitting her shoulders and her face and her worn uniform. She walked faster. The diner uniform clung to her body. The collar hung heavy against her neck. Her shoes, borrowed shoes from Mrs. Chen because her own had worn through, began to squelch with water. She had walked this highway before. She would walk it again. She had walked worse distances. She had survived worse storms. But something in this moment felt different. Something in the way the wind tore at her jacket and the way the darkness pressed so completely that she could barely see 5 feet ahead. At 3:41, white headlights appeared behind her. A van. Not a car. A white panel van that slowed as it approached. The window came down. She could see a man's face illuminated by the dashboard light. Douglas Hale. She recognized him immediately. He had come into the diner 3 times in the past 6 weeks. He had always ordered coffee and pie and made comments about her appearance. 3 weeks ago, he had asked her to help with something. Help him with something. The exact words had been unclear, but the meaning had been unmistakable. She had said no. She had said it quietly. She had said it while removing his plate. He had left a $2 tip on an $18 check. The van stopped beside her. The window was fully down now. Rain falling into the cabin. "You turned me down at the diner, Aria." His voice was calm. Almost friendly. "Big mistake. Women like you, desperate women with debts and kids, you don't get to say no to me." She ran. The highway shoulder turned to grass and scrub brush. Her borrowed shoe slipped on wet earth. 15 seconds passed before his hand closed around her arm. 15 seconds. A nothing. A blink. He was larger than she was, muscular, the kind of man who had spent time in gyms or prison or both. He spun her around and slammed her against the guardrail. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. She fought. This was the only choice left to her. She clawed at his face, her nails finding skin and drawing blood. She kicked at his shins. She screamed into the thunder, but the thunder was louder. His fist connected with her left eye. Stars exploded across her vision. His hand wrapped around her throat. She could feel the difference in strength. She could feel the absolute certainty of what was about to happen. She was going to lose this. She was going to lose everything. So she bit his hand. Blood flooded her mouth. He screamed and pulled away. She stumbled backward onto the highway pavement. Her eye was swelling shut. Her throat burned where his fingers had pressed. Blood dripped from her split lip onto the asphalt. Then the night changed. 3 sets of headlights pierced the storm, powerful and white and absolutely certain. Black SUVs. Moving in formation like something with a single consciousness. They appeared through the rain and the darkness like the answer to a prayer she had not known she was praying. They stopped. Their doors opened in unison. The man who stepped out from the center vehicle wore a black suit tailored from fabric so expensive it seemed to repel water. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that was neither young nor old, angular and sharp like something carved from stone. His eyes were the gray of a winter storm. A thin scar ran from his eye to his cheekbone, and when he moved like a man who had never questioned his own authority, like a general surveying a battlefield and finding it beneath him. Giovanni Calabrese did not walk. He glided. He did not hurry. He did not rush. Behind him came 2 men in identical suits. One was tall with the shoulders of someone who broke people for a living. The other held an umbrella over Giovanni's head, keeping the rain away from him while Giovanni himself remained unmarked, untouched, completely separate from the storm that was destroying the world. He stopped 12 feet from Douglas Hale. "Who did this?" Giovanni asked. His voice was deep and solid like an oath, like a vow being made that could never be unmade. Aria could barely speak. Her throat was raw. Her left eye was sealed shut with swelling. She raised her arm and pointed at Hale with her trembling hand. Giovanni looked at Hale for exactly 3 seconds. Then he turned to the 2 men behind him and nodded once. "You don't know who I work for," Hale said. His voice had changed. It had become thin and small and nothing like the voice that had threatened her minutes before. "I have protection." "I have?" "Not anymore," Giovanni said. The men moved. They were efficient. Hale was lifted and moved toward one of the SUVs. He was screaming now, his body struggling, his voice cracking into sounds that were barely human. The door opened. He was placed inside. The door closed. The screaming continued, but it was muffled now, separated from the world. Giovanni knelt beside Aria. This moment would matter. This moment would be the hinge upon which her entire life would turn, and she would not know it yet. She would only know that she was wet and cold and bleeding and terrified, and that a man who wore a suit worth more than 3 months of her wages was looking at her with an intensity that seemed to contain the entire force of his will. "You're safe now," he said. He extended his hand. "Can you stand?" She could barely move. But his hand was there. Steady. Certain. Waiting. She took it. He lifted her easily, one hand supporting her back. She was pressed against the fabric of his jacket, and even soaked in rain and blood and sweat, she could smell something expensive and controlled beneath it all. He guided her toward the center SUV. The man with the umbrella moved to shield them both, though his eyes remained fixed straight ahead, seeing nothing, a perfectly programmed machine. The back seat of the SUV was leather. Warmer than the rain. Drier than the world outside. Giovanni placed her gently against the seat and said something to the driver in Italian, words she could not understand but whose meaning was clear in the tone. Go, hurry, protect. She lost consciousness at 3:52 in the morning, her swollen eye sealed shut, her throat carrying the shape of a stranger's hands, her $5 and her daughter's school list still in her apron pocket, not knowing that everything she had survived, everything she had endured, was about to collide with a world she could not have imagined existed. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside the black SUV, Giovanni Calabrese sat in the darkness and watched Aria sleep, rain hammering the roof in a rhythm like a heartbeat, and something shifted in his chest that he could not name, something that had not moved in 15 years, something dangerous and cold and entirely unexpected. The lightning flashed across his scarred face. He did not look away. Aria's eyes opened to whiteness. Not the darkness of the diner storage room where she sometimes slept between shifts. Not the cramped studio apartment with the broken radiator. This was silk. Egyptian cotton, smooth and cool against her bruised skin. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Los Angeles spreading across the dawn like a promise she had never been allowed to make. She tried to sit up. Pain shot through her ribs, her throat, her left eye sealed shut by swelling. The room tilted. She was on a bed the size of her old kitchen, in a house she did not recognize, wearing clothes that were not hers, soft gray sweatpants and a white shirt that smelled like detergent and nothing else. Her diner uniform was gone. Panic moved through her like ice water. Emma. She forced herself upright, gritting her teeth against the agony, and her bare feet touched hardwood flooring so polished it reflected the sunrise. The door opened before she could reach it. Giovanni Calabrese entered first, still wearing yesterday's clothes, that black shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his dark eyes carrying the weight of a man who had not slept. Behind him came another man, older, with salt and pepper hair and the careful movements of someone trained in violence. Dario. He carried a silver tray, fresh fruit, toast, scrambled eggs, orange juice, coffee. Aria's hand went to her throat instinctively. Your daughter is safe, Giovanni said. His voice was steady, factual, the voice of someone accustomed to being believed without proof. Tony brought her here 1 hour ago. She's eating pancakes in the kitchen with Mrs. Chen, who oversees the household. Emma has asked 3 times if you were awake yet. Relief crashed through Aria's chest so violently she thought she might collapse. She sank back onto the bed. Dario set the tray on the nightstand with careful precision and withdrew, closing the door behind him with a soft click. Giovanni pulled a chair from the corner of the room and sat across from her, leaving several feet of distance, a deliberate gesture. His scarred face caught the early light, a line running from his left eye to his cheekbone, white against his olive skin, ancient and deliberate. Who are you? Aria's voice came out fractured, barely a whisper. Why did you help me? Giovanni Calabrese. He said it the way other men might say their name in a courtroom. And I helped you because the man in that van preys on women who have no one to protect them. Now you do. She stared at him. The panic she felt was different now, not the immediate terror of Douglas Hale's hands on her throat, but something slower, deeper. This man had pulled her into a world she could not understand, and understanding it might be more dangerous than anything Hale had done. That man, Giovanni continued, has been running a trafficking operation on the West Side for 8 years. The police know about it. The city council knows about it. No one moves against him because he has protection. Wealthy protection. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The woman who protects him is Margaret Harrington. Do you know that name? Aria shook her head. She's a socialite. City council member. Comes from old money, the kind that buys silence. Giovanni leaned forward. But you were going to tell me everything about Douglas Hale. Starting now. So she told him how Hale had approached her at the diner 2 weeks earlier, complimenting her beauty, offering her opportunities that paid $50,000 a month. How she had laughed at first, thinking it was a joke. How the offers had turned into visits. How he had shown her photographs of other women, smiling women in expensive clothes, and said she could be one of them. How she had said no. How his smile had disappeared and been replaced with something else entirely. How he had followed her to the parking lot 3 days later. How his hands had found her throat. Giovanni listened without moving. When she finished, he stood and walked to the window. Los Angeles continued beneath them, indifferent to violence, indifferent to rescue, indifferent to everything except its own forward motion. "He won't touch you again," Giovanni said. The statement contained no doubt, no qualification. "You'll stay here until you heal. Your debts, your problems, they're handled now. But I need to know everything about that man's operation. Names, locations, methods. Everything." Aria wanted to ask how he could possibly handle anything. How one man, no matter how dangerous, could erase the weight of $22,000 in debt that would crush her for the rest of her life. But something in the way he stood, the absolute certainty in his voice, made her believe he could move mountains if he decided they were in his way. The footsteps started then, the sound of small feet running across hardwood, a child's voice calling out high and bright, "Mama? Are you awake? This house has a garden." Emma appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, her dark hair uncombed, syrup on her chin. She took in the large bed, the beautiful room, the powerful man standing by the window, and her 5-year-old logic concluded that they had somehow entered a fairy tale. Aria pulled her daughter into her arms, trying not to cry out from the pain. She buried her face in Emma's hair and breathed in the smell of her child, maple syrup and sleep and the lavender detergent Mrs. Chen must have used on her clothes. Over the next 14 days, Aria's body began to heal. The swelling around her eye receded. The purple bruises faded to yellow and green. Her ribs still ached when she took deep breaths, but the pain became manageable, background noise instead of the entire orchestra. Emma explored Giovanni's mansion like she was discovering continents. She drew pictures in every room with crayons Mrs. Chen produced from endless supply. She taught Dario how to braid her hair, or tried to, his large hands comically clumsy with the strands. She called Giovanni Mr. Giovanni and presented him with crayon masterpieces that he somehow displayed on his office wall, between photographs of dead men and documents marked with blood-red stamps. Aria insisted on working. She couldn't accept charity, couldn't live like a pet in this beautiful cage. So Giovanni gave her access to his office and she organized his files, not financial records, those were protected, but personnel files and property records. She was careful, methodical. Her hands, calloused from years of waitressing, moved across documents with the precision of someone accustomed to handling fragile things. She noticed Tony watching her with something like bewilderment. "In 15 years, he said to Dario one afternoon when they thought she wasn't listening, I've never seen the boss let a civilian this close. Especially not a woman. Especially not one with a kid. It should have made her feel safer. It didn't." On the 14th night, at 11:11 p.m., Aria moved through the mansion as quietly as footsteps could move across marble and hardwood. She had a duffel bag containing $4,700, everything Giovanni had paid her as household manager, every dollar she had refused to spend, saving it for this moment. She slipped out through the kitchen exit where the security system had a 4-second window that she had discovered through 3 weeks of careful observation. She met a woman named Sarah in a parking lot beneath an overpass. Sarah was thin, hollow-eyed, with track marks running in every direction up her arms like a map of hell. But her hands were steady as she took the bag from Aria and pulled her into an embrace. "Thank you," Sarah whispered. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Aria didn't tell her about Giovanni. Didn't tell her where the money came from. She just held her and thought about the other 16 women still trapped in Hale's network, still waiting, still bleeding. When she returned to the mansion, she didn't notice the security camera in the garden. She didn't notice Giovanni's office lights still burning at 1:33 in the morning. She didn't notice the tablet on his desk displaying footage of her meeting with Sarah, frame by frame, a confession written in her own movements. She went to Emma's room and kissed her daughter's forehead, and she cried silently, her hand over her own mouth to muffle the sound. Meanwhile, in his office, Giovanni Calabrese sat in darkness and watched the footage play again, his scarred face illuminated by screen light. His lieutenant Tony stood in the doorway, waiting for orders, waiting for the decision that would determine whether Aria Morgan lived or died. Giovanni's voice, when he finally spoke, was barely audible above the hum of the building's climate control system. Let's see how deep this goes. The schoolyard erupts into chaos. 17 children screaming, mothers pulling their babies backward, a white van idling at the curb like a predator that has caught the scent of prey. Douglas Hale steps out, his shadow stretching across the pavement, a man whose face had haunted Aria's nightmares for 3 weeks straight, the man whose hands had circled her throat in that diner parking lot before she fought him off with everything her broken body could summon. 2 men flank him, their shoulders wide beneath cheap blazers, their eyes the empty grey of men who had stopped asking questions years ago. Tony's voice crackles through the radio at 2:08 p.m. Boss, Hale is at the school. Across the city, in an office tower on Wilshire Boulevard where the air conditioning costs more than Aria's monthly rent, Giovanni Calabrese's hand tightens around his phone. His scarred face, that scar running from his left temple to his jaw like a blade wrapped in ice, shows nothing. But his jaw clenches. His knuckles blanch white against the phone's edge. Do not engage, Giovanni says, each word dropped like a stone into still water. Bring Aria. Now. The diner on Sunset Boulevard smells of grease and burnt coffee. Aria is halfway through her first shift back after 3 weeks of hiding in the mansion, pretending to be someone she was not. Her waitress uniform, the same faded blue she has worn for 4 years, fits her differently now. Everything fits her differently since she stopped eating, since the fear moved into her bones and set up permanent residence. A customer at table 6 waves his empty coffee cup. She moves toward him on autopilot, her mind 3,000 miles away with Emma, always with Emma, wondering if her daughter remembered her face or if 5-year-olds forgot so quickly. Tony appears in the diner entrance like a storm cloud taking human form. 6'2", broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal suit that costs more than Aria makes in 3 months. His dark eyes find her across the crowded diner and she knows. She knows before he says anything. She sees it in the way his hand extends toward her, the urgency in the set of his shoulders. We need to move, Tony says quietly. Now. The SUV accelerates through afternoon traffic with a sound like a beast waking up. Aria sits in the back, her hands pressed together so hard her fingernails leave crescents in her palms. Rain has started falling, summer rain that comes suddenly in Los Angeles, turning the streets dark and slick. The clock on the dashboard reads 2:52 p.m. Talk to me, Aria whispers. Boss is handling it, Tony says from the front seat, but his jaw is tight, his hands gripping the steering wheel like it might escape. For blocks away, Giovanni's black SUV moves through traffic like a knife through water. 12 men in dark suits sit in vehicles behind him, Marco, Enzo, Dimitri, and 9 others whose names are synced with loyalty older than blood. Giovanni's phone rings. It is the principal of Westside Elementary, calling to report an altercation at the school gate. The man is asking for a child. Emma Morgan. He's saying his family. Giovanni hangs up. The school materializes before them at 2:58 p.m. The pickup gates are chaos, mothers pulling children away from the white van, teachers moving with the panicked efficiency of people who have rehearsed this scenario but never believed it would happen. A security guard stands 20 feet from Douglas Hale, his hand hovering near his belt, his face the color of old milk. Hale moves toward the crowd of departing children like a shark sensing blood in water. Then he sees her. Emma Morgan emerges from the school doors with her backpack in one hand and a drawing in the other, a picture of her mother and herself under a rainbow, crayoned in thick, hopeful strokes. She is 5 years old. She is the color of hope in a world that has shown her very little of it. She wears a pink sweater with a small hole in the sleeve where she snagged it on the monkey bars last week. Hale moves toward her. The SUV screeches to a stop. Aria sees her daughter in that terrible instant, sees Emma's face, bright and unsuspecting, turning toward the stranger approaching, and something in Aria's chest shatters like a glass dropped from a great height. She runs. Her legs move faster than they have moved in 3 weeks. Tony reaches for her arm and she wrenches away. The diner uniform flaps around her. The rain soaks into her hair. She screams Emma's name and the sound tears her throat open like a wound. Hale's hand reaches for Emma's shoulder. Aria throws herself between them. The blade is already rising, Hale's knife, a hunting knife with a 7-inch blade that catches the grey afternoon light. Aria sees it for only a fraction of a second before it finds her. The blade enters her side below her ribs, sinking deep, and the pain is white-hot and enormous. She gasps, stumbles forward, wraps her arms around Emma so fiercely that both of them fall to the pavement together. Hale raises the knife again. That is when Giovanni Calabrese moves. He crosses the schoolyard in 5 strides, each step deliberate, each movement controlled by an intelligence that has been honed through 30 years of violence. He grabs Hale's wrist, just grabs it, no flourish, no hesitation. The sound of bone breaking is like a branch snapping under weight. Hale's wrist folds at an angle that human wrists should never fold at. He screams, a high animal sound that echoes off the brick walls of the school. 12 men in black suits surround the scene. Parents scramble backward, pulling their children against their bodies. A mother drops her phone and it skids across the wet pavement. Teachers herd children back inside with the urgency of people protecting livestock from a predator. Aria collapses. Blood spreads across her blue waitress uniform like a flower blooming in fast motion. Emma is screaming, not words, just pure animal sound, and Aria pulls her daughter against her chest, their bodies tangled together on the cold wet pavement. Giovanni drops beside them. This is the moment that witnesses will remember for the rest of their lives. The most powerful man in the Los Angeles underworld, a man whose name is synonymous with fear and consequence, drops to his knees on a wet schoolyard beside a bleeding waitress and her sobbing daughter. "Stay with me," Giovanni says. His voice is low, solid like an oath. "Aria, stay with me." Her eyes are already losing focus. The rain mixes with blood, running together down her face. She grips Emma's hair with her free hand, the hand not pressed against the wound in her side, and pulls her daughter closer. "Emma," Aria whispers. "Emma, baby, it's okay." "Mommy," Emma cries, and the word is the most precious and terrible thing Giovanni has ever heard. Paramedics arrive at 3:04 p.m. Their sirens cut through the rain like a knife cutting through air. They lift Aria onto a stretcher, careful of the wound, working with the practiced efficiency of people who see trauma before breakfast. Giovanni stands, and when he turns to face Douglas Hale, who is crawling across the pavement with his wrist hanging useless at his side, his expression is the expression of a man deciding how to remake the world. "You tried to kill a child," Giovanni says. His voice carries across the schoolyard, across the screaming mothers and fleeing children and gathering news cameras. "You tried to kill my daughter." He does not say stepdaughter. He does not say the girl he has known for only 3 weeks. He says daughter, and everyone listening understands that the line between what is biological and what is sacred has been erased. He nods to Marco. "Call the Moretti family," Giovanni says. "Tell them I have a gift for them." The Moretti family controls the port, the south side, and a reputation for patience with their enemies that stretches longer than mercy. They are the kind of family that makes men disappear into the machinery of the underworld and ensures that nobody ever finds even the bones. Hale's face goes white. "No. No, please, Calabrese. I'll disappear. I'll leave the country. You should have thought of that," Giovanni says quietly, "before you touched her daughter." A black van arrives at 3:11 p.m., unmarked and efficient. 3 Moretti soldiers emerge, men built like construction equipment, with neck tattoos and the bearing of people who have committed acts that would destroy ordinary human beings. They drag Hale toward the van. His screams are the screams of a man understanding that he has made a catastrophic error in judgment, that the mercy of ordinary prison is no longer an option available to him. The van doors close. The sirens fade. By evening, the only evidence that Douglas Hale existed at all is the blood on the schoolyard pavement and the trauma in 17 children's eyes. But Giovanni's rage has not finished burning. At 8:33 p.m., Margaret Harrington's mansion glows with $10,000 worth of carefully positioned lighting. Her charity gala is in full swing, 200 guests in designer clothes, politicians with teeth too white to be accidental, socialites whose names appear in the society pages alongside photographs of their diamond donations. The guest of honor is Margaret herself, beautiful and polished and dripping in connections that reach from City Hall to the governor's office. She wears a dress that costs more than Aria's annual salary, and when she laughs, people laugh with her because they have learned that Margaret Harrington's approval and disapproval carries currency in Los Angeles. Giovanni arrives at 9:36 p.m. carrying a single USB drive. He walks through the front doors of her mansion like he owns it. Her security recognizes him and steps aside because there are certain men in the city for whom security is merely theater. He moves through the crowds of beautiful people, past the champagne fountains and the servers carrying caviar on tiny silver spoons, and he walks directly to the stage where a live band plays. He takes the microphone from the shocked host's hands. "Ladies and gentlemen," Giovanni says, and the room falls silent because his voice carries the weight of a man who is accustomed to being obeyed. "Your hostess Margaret Harrington has something she would like to share with you." He plugs the USB drive into the projector system. Files appear on the screen above them: bank transfers, property records, photographs of women in basements and back rooms, the entire architecture of Margaret's empire of exploitation spread out in high definition across the ballroom wall. Margaret's face drains of color. She moves toward the stage, her voice cutting through the shocked murmur of the crowd. "This is fake. He's a criminal. This man is a criminal trying to." "These are federal records," Giovanni says calmly. "The FBI has already been provided with copies. They will arrive in 4 minutes. I called them personally." The FBI arrived at 9:04 p.m. Federal agents in dark windbreakers, their badges catching the light, their faces the impassive faces of people trained to move through chaos without emotion. They arrest Margaret in front of the news cameras that have already materialized on the mansion lawn. Her carefully constructed face crumbles. Her hands, which have touched the shoulders of senators and poured wine for judges, are handcuffed behind her back. The police cruiser doors close on her screams. "You can't do this. Do you know who I am?" The agent driving the vehicle does not even glance at her. "You're going to federal prison for 40 years. That's who you are." Within 1 hour, the story has spread across the internet like wildfire. By morning, every news outlet in Los Angeles is running footage of Margaret's arrest. By afternoon, the city council has opened an investigation. By the end of the week, her charity boards have removed her name, her business partners have abandoned her, and the structure she spent 2 decades building has collapsed into dust. Giovanni watches from the shadows of the mansion entrance, then he drives to St. Mary's Hospital on Wilshire Boulevard. The hospital room is quiet at 3:11 a.m. A single lamp illuminates the space. Aria lies in the hospital bed, her side wrapped in white bandages that cover 16 stitches, the wound packed with gauze and the promise of antibiotics. Morphine drips into her for line. Emma is curled in the chair beside her mother, her small body covered with Aria's jacket, her 5-year-old face peaceful in the way that only children's faces can be peaceful. Aria stares at the ceiling. The morphine fog is clearing, leaving only the weight of understanding behind. She reaches down and touches the bandage covering her wound. Her hand shakes. She thinks about how close she came to leaving Emma an orphan. She thinks about how easily the knife could have gone deeper, how the difference between a scar and a funeral is sometimes measured in millimeters. She thinks about what kind of mother brings her daughter into a world where men arrive at schoolyard gates with hunting knives, where the difference between safety and violence is sometimes just the presence of the right dangerous man at the right moment. The rain continues outside, drumming against the window like 1,000 fingers trying to get in. Aria reaches for her phone on the nightstand. Her fingers hover over the numbers. She knows the CPS hotline by heart. She has rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her mind. Maybe Emma would be better off with someone else. Maybe some safe family, some ordinary people who do not traffic in violence and fear and the machinery of organized crime. Maybe her daughter would be better off without her. Emma shifts in her sleep. Her small hand reaches out, fingers grasping, and she finds her mother's hand without waking. 5-year-old fingers wrap around Aria's thumb. The grip is not tight, it is the gentle grip of complete trust, of a child who has never questioned whether her mother will be there. Aria puts the phone down. She pulls Emma's hand to her chest, places it over her beating heart, and whispers words that only her daughter can hear. "I'll be stronger. For you. I promise you, I will be stronger." Outside the window, in the hospital corridor, Giovanni Calabrese stands motionless. He watches through the glass. He watches Aria hold their daughter. He watches the impossible love bloom between them like a flower that should not exist in winter but does anyway. And he knows, with the certainty of a man who has learned to read the human heart like others read maps, that she is already far stronger than she could possibly believe. The rain continues to fall on Los Angeles. The storm will pass. The morning will come. And everything, absolutely everything, has already changed. 1 year later. The city of Los Angeles stretches beneath the night sky like a sleeping giant, and Aria Morgan stands 23 floors above the streets where she once counted pennies. Floor-to-ceiling windows frame her penthouse office, and the skyline glitters with lights that cost more than everything she owned a year ago. She wears a charcoal business suit tailored to fit her frame, her dark hair swept back with precision, and her posture carries something that was missing before: certainty. The nameplate on her desk reads, Executive Director, Second Chance Housing Initiative. On the wall behind her hang photographs of 42 women standing in doorways of safe homes. 17 children smile from school photos. 3 Douglas Hale facilities sit vacant and padlocked across the city. Aria touches her fingertips to the cold window glass. The rain from that summer night feels like a lifetime away, though it has only been 365 days. She remembers the $5 in her pocket. The foreclosure notice. The weight of Emma's hand in hers. A soft knock breaks the silence. The sound is measured, unhurried. She knows who stands in her doorway before she turns. Giovanni Calabrese fills the space like a storm moving into still air. His black suit fits him like it was carved from obsidian, the fabric catching light the way expensive things do. The scar running from his left eye to his cheekbone catches the city lights filtering through the windows. His hair carries threads of silver now, or perhaps it always did and she was too afraid to look closely. His eyes hold that same unreadable intensity, but something has changed in how they settle on her. He stayed away for 11 months. She knows this because she counted every single day. "I needed to tell you something," Giovanni says. His voice moves through the room like thunder rolling across a desert. "The night I suspected you of betraying me, I had already made the call." Aria's breath catches. The air in the office seems to compress. Tony was supposed to handle it at 3 in the morning, Giovanni continues, stepping closer to the window. He stands beside her but does not touch her. "You had 2 hours to live." "Giovanni." 8 minutes before the deadline, I called it off. His jaw tightens as the words arrive. 2:52 a.m. "Do you know why I made that call?" Aria shakes her head. The city spins slowly behind her eyes. "Because I watched you go to Emma's room and kiss her goodnight. And I saw you crying." His voice drops lower. Traitors do not cry over their children. They cry over their crimes. You were crying because you knew the danger you were in, and you did it anyway. You chose those 17 women over your own safety. You have always chosen something other than yourself. The silence between them feels like a held breath. Outside, car horns sound on the streets below, distant and small as insect noises. I came here to tell you the truth I have carried for a year, Giovanni says. You changed something in me. I have spent 15 years trusting no one after my brother's betrayal. Marco taught me that blood lies, that loyalty is performance, that mercy is weakness. Then you walked out into the dark 14 nights in a row to save strangers, and you made me remember why I started this in the first place. Aria turns to face him. His expression is unguarded in a way she has never seen. Like a fortress with its gates open. My father built this family to protect people who had no protection, Giovanni continues. I forgot that somewhere between the money and the power and the endless violence. You reminded me. You saved my life twice, Aria says. Her voice trembles like a candle in wind. Once from Douglas Hale. Once from myself. And you saved mine from becoming something I could not recognize anymore. Giovanni reaches into his jacket. The movement is careful, deliberate. He pulls out a piece of paper, creased and worn from being folded and unfolded many times. It is the letter. The final note is from the debt collector. The one stamped across its face in red ink like a sentence. The one that demanded $22,000 in 7 days. I kept this. To remember the woman who had $5 and infinite courage. Aria takes the letter. Her hands shake as she holds it. The paper feels thin as tissue, as if it might tear. She looks at Giovanni, and something breaks open inside her chest like ice breaking on a river. Giovanni. Stay. He stops moving toward the door. His hand still rests on the frame. Emma asks about you, Aria says. She calls you the man who made Mama smile again. Stay for breakfast. Let her see you are okay. Giovanni turns back to face her fully. For the first time in 15 years, his expression shows emotion that has not been carefully constructed. Not fury. Not calculation. Something far more dangerous. Something that looks like surrender. I would like that very much. They stand together at the window as the night begins its slow transformation into dawn. The city below starts to wake. Lights come on in apartment buildings. Traffic begins to move on the streets. The skyline shifts from black to deep blue to purple to gold. It is the kind of sunrise that feels like a promise being kept. Hours later, Emma sits at the dining table, her small frame barely visible above a stack of pancakes. She is 6 years old now, her dark hair braided with colored ribbons, her eyes carrying a light that was not there a year ago. She wears a school uniform, the collar slightly crooked. She looks at Giovanni with the kind of unguarded trust that only children possess. Did you eat a lot of pancakes when you were a boy? Emma asks, syrup coating her chin. I did not eat many pancakes when I was a boy, Giovanni says. He watches Emma eat like she is teaching him something crucial about the world. My childhood was different from yours. Was it sad? Emma asks this with the devastating simplicity of a child who has learned to recognize sadness in adults. Yes, Giovanni says. It was sad. You should have had more pancakes, Emma announces with complete certainty. Pancakes make sad things less sad. Giovanni's expression shifts. It is barely perceptible. A tightening around his eyes. A slight parting of his lips. Aria watches him gather himself like a man collecting broken pieces from the ground. You are very wise for 6 years old. 3 days later, at the pier overlooking the Pacific Ocean, Aria kneels in front of Emma as the sun drops toward the horizon like a burning coin. The girl holds bread crumbs in her small fists, tossing them to seagulls that wheel and dive around them. The ocean smells of salt and distance. The wind carries the sound of waves breaking against the pilings beneath their feet. Mama, are we safe now? Emma asks without looking away from the birds. Aria takes her daughter's hand. We are more than safe, baby. We are free. What is the difference? Emma tilts her head, genuinely curious. Safe means nothing bad can happen. Free means even if something bad happens, you know you will survive it. You know you are strong enough. You know that someone will be there. Aria pulls Emma close, and her daughter leans into her without hesitation. That is what freedom is. 50 feet away, a black SUV sits parked against the curb. The engine is off, the interior dark. Tony sits in the driver's seat, watching the two figures silhouetted against the sunset. He glances in the rearview mirror at Giovanni Calabrese, who sits motionless in the back seat. "Boss, you gonna tell her?" Tony asks quietly. "Tell her what?" Giovanni's voice emerges like smoke from a cigarette. "That you are in love with her." The silence stretches for a long moment. Long enough for 3 waves to break against the shore. Long enough for the sun to sink another degree toward the horizon. "She already knows," Giovanni finally says. "And when she is ready, she will tell me." The SUV pulls away from the curb and drives slowly down the Pacific Coast Highway, disappearing into the evening traffic. Aria feels the shift in air pressure, the sense of presence withdrawing. She does not turn to look. Emma tugs on her hand. "Mama, look. That seagull is bigger than the others." Aria looks where her daughter points and finds the smallest smile moving across her face. This is what it feels like to build a life. Not grand. Not perfect. Just this, breadcrumbs and seagulls and a child's hand in yours and the knowledge that the storm has passed. Margaret Harrington sits in a federal prison cell in Northern California, 350 miles away. Her designer clothes have been replaced with orange. Her foundation has been dismantled. Her name is spoken now only in scandals and court documents. The 40-year sentence stretched before her like a road with no exit. Douglas Hale disappeared 7 months ago. Not dead. Death would have been too clean, too merciful for a man who sold women like inventory. He was delivered to a rival family in a rural corner of Nevada, and his screams lasted until his voice gave out, and then the darkness took him in ways that could not be documented or described. His network collapsed within weeks. 17 women testified. 5 facilities shut down. The operation he had spent 20 years building was erased like chalk from a blackboard. Aria Morgan stands in her non-profit office, signing paperwork that will house 3 more women, 3 more children, 3 more lives pulled back from the edge. She signs her name with a pen that costs more than the $5 she once carried. The thought of that $5 does not hurt anymore. Instead, it feels like a foundation. Something solid that she stands on. The storm will pass and you are far stronger than you think. This is the truth that Aria Morgan learned, the truth that Giovanni Calabrese remembered, the truth that echoes through every empty trafficking facility and every newly safe home across Los Angeles. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light does that. Only the decision to be stronger. Only the choice to stand between danger and those you love. If this story moved your heart, if it made you think of the invisible people in your own city fighting battles you cannot see, then drop a like on this video. Share it with someone you know who is standing in their own storm. Subscribe so you do not miss tomorrow's story of survival that you need to hear. Remember, courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something else matters more. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We wish you good health, joy in your days, and the strength to weather whatever storms come. We will see you again in the next video. Goodbye.